we're going to do today is a brief overview of how to integrate precisely language and content. Okay, so first of all, here's a definition. This is a definition, a famous definition from a famous book. And it says that it is a dual-focused educational approach in which an additional language is used for the learning and teaching of both content and language. So, as you can already see here, this approach was not created specifically for English. It can work with a number of languages, of course, right? So the main goal here is to be able to teach curriculum subjects such as, I don't know, geography or civics or even marketing, engineering in another language, a different language from the language of the learners. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, so this is a very important point of CLIL, because probably some of you are wondering if you are doing CLIL or to what extent you're doing CLIL, and probably this slide can help you answer this question, because CLIL includes a range of options. For example, if you're teaching content, let's say 5 to 15% of your time, let's say probably you do one science page a week, that would be low exposure to content. Then it might be the case that you do a little bit more than one page per week, let's say from 15 to 50% of your teaching time. So that would be a medium exposure, but over 50% of your teaching time, if over percent of your teaching time is based or is aimed at teaching content in English, then you have a high CLIL exposure. Okay, so well, I just picked two interesting examples. I bet most of you have seen books such as this one. Here, I'm going to use here it is. A book like this, they are usually very big, very thick books. And this means that you're probably doing a lot of science teaching. But also it could be something very simple like this on the other side. So probably you're just working a little bit with some content, with some curriculum subjects. Okay, so that would be like a visual example of this exposure. Then we have another important concept here, because depending on your exposure to CLIL, it could be addressed as hard CLIL or soft CLIL. If you're teaching more content or your teaching is more content driven, you would be doing hard CLIL. But on the other hand, if you have a stronger focus on language, then you would be doing some, or what they call soft CLIL. So that would be only some curriculum subjects in English as opposed to hard CLIL, which means your whole curriculum in English. For example, there are some universities that teach all of their subjects in English by the end of the program. Okay, so moving on. This framework includes, or let's say relies on these 4 pillars. They are content, communication, cognition, and culture. And more than pillars I think I would call this the ingredients, right? Because if you want to distinguish general English from English with a CLIL approach, probably you would be looking at these 4 items. Content, of course, if you're teaching maths or science or civics or whatever, that would be your first ingredient. Then communication, and this is our regular language lesson, your grammar, your vocabulary, your skills, reading, writing, speaking, etc., etc., etc. Everything that we know in the ELT world, let's say. Then another important ingredient would be this cognition, which refers to learning and thinking processes. These are thinking strategies, study strategies that, of course, are very important when we want to help learners access unfamiliar content, such as what we would have in a curriculum subject. And finally, another very, 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 very relevant ingredient would be culture, right? Because the idea behind this CLIL approach is precisely to create or to foster collaboration and global citizenship and these important concepts that refer to cultures and languages all over the world. So this would be your 4 ingredients, and this is called the framework, the 4 C's framework, just in case you see it in a book. Okay, so our presentation today is going to focus then on some concepts, some ideas that might help us do this integration of language and content. Now, remember how much content or how much language or how much of a language focus will depend on your institution, your aims, your goals, right? So there is no set amount, there is no correct amount. You're going to decide depending on where you are and, of course, where you want to go, okay? So we're first going to look at ways to support language learning when you're teaching, for example, a maths lesson, how to integrate language. Then we're going to look at some options for supporting content. This is how to make content that might be or might appear difficult or challenging more accessible to learners. And finally, we're going to look at some ways of organizing this integration. Okay, good. So let's continue. So one of the first ideas to support language learning in a CLIL environment, in a CLIL, under a CLIL approach, is looking at vocabulary and helping learners be more aware of the types of vocabulary that they can find. For example, you have 4 different groups of words here. Group 1, circle, circumference, and diameter. Group 2, center, number, size. Group 3, about, across, and many. And group 4, sharp rise, dramatic fall. So please look at the groups of words and tell me through the chat some ideas on what is the purpose of these groups, what these groups mean. Why do you think they are grouped this way? Let's see if you can share some ideas. Can you imagine why they are grouped this way? Okay, there's an idea there. Categories. Okay, that's an idea. Any other ideas? Thank you, Nancy, for your idea. Thank you for contributing. Okay, well, let's move on. Functions, okay, great. Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to show you the answers right now. There. Okay, so let's look at this. Group 1, that would be your subject specific or content obligatory words. Let's go back and look at the words. Circle, circumference, diameter. Very, 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 very specific of a math lesson. Then we can look at a different group of words, and it says content compatible general vocabulary. So this is vocabulary. If you read carefully, center, number, size, this kind of conveys an idea of math, but also these are words that are used in other subjects or even in everyday situations. So they are called content compatible. They are math words maybe that can be used for different things. Then in the third group, you have these words about across many that you might also encounter in a math lesson, but very important, these are high frequency words. High frequency words are words that you need to speak a language correctly. They say they make up to an 80% of the language, of the English language, for example. As you can see here, well, they are prepositions, quantifiers, so probably they are abstract. Their concept is abstract. So it's important that students are familiar with high frequency words. Sorry for that. Here, because these words will help them communicate. And finally, we have another category here, another group of words: sharp rise, dramatic fall, and these words are collocations. Collocations are words that go together, always go together. Okay, so we won't get very deep into collocations or which words go together, but it's important to bear this in mind. There are some word combinations that you find often. You wouldn't say a good rise, you would say a sharp rise, and you wouldn't say a bad fall, you would say a dramatic fall. They belong together. Okay, good. So looking at words and different types of grouping words. Then here's another guessing activity for you. Another way to help or to provide language support when we're working with CLIL would be to look at structures, or what we usually know as grammar, right? So we have two activities here. Well, we have 3 sentences and then 2 activities. So let's look at the sentences, read the sentences, please, and try to answer, post some ideas there in the chat. What curriculum area does each sentence belong to? Share some ideas in the chat, please. What do you think? You can post number 1, this, number 2, this, number 3, that. Okay, I have some ideas there. Past tenses, good. What else? But what curriculum area, what subject do you think they belong to? Interest rates fell last year. What would be the subject? Can you imagine? Economics, yes, very good. Excellent idea. Yes, Alicia. Nancy, very good. Thank you. Claudia. Okay, now number 2, she had ruled for 30 years before the revolution began. That's an easy one. What would be the subject there? What do you think? Okay, history, politics, good, perfect, excellent, great ideas. Good, and then the pianist was playing slowly when the pianist beat the triangle loudly. Arts, yeah, music, arts, very good, excellent, perfect. Now, let's look at the second question. What's the meaning of the sentence according to the form of the verb? So we already mentioned these are past tenses, but what's the meaning? Because these are different types of past tenses. So what's different? What do you think? What is the meaning of each one? Any ideas on the meaning of number 1, interest rates fell last year? Is this a finished action or an ongoing action? Exactly, finished action. Simple past for finished actions. Then she had ruled for 30 years before the revolution began. If you have any ideas, just post them in the chat, please. And then was playing. Okay, I have some ideas during the chat and let's check. So the first sentence, as we already mentioned, economics, a finished event, past simple. History, looking back at an earlier event or past event, that would be past perfect. And then music, past continuous, yes, but the meaning is an interrupted action in the past, okay? So imagine that you're teaching economics, so maybe you want to make sure that your students can handle their verbs in past. Or you're teaching history, very likely you're going to have to establish a context, so the past perfect would make a lot of sense. And if you're teaching music, well, probably the past continuous would be relevant to your lesson, okay? So this is very important because we're going to be looking at language, but from the content perspective. What's needed for the content? What's needed for your subject or the subject that you're trying to teach? Okay, good. Moving on. So these are other two very important concepts for providing language support when we're teaching with CLIL. And these words here, BICS and CALP, here's what they stand for: basic interpersonal communication skills, and CALP, cognitive academic language proficiency. So in other words, your BICS, basic interpersonal communication skills, these are the words that you need for social situations. The words, the vocabulary, the grammar, the language that you need for everyday situations, such as greetings and introductions. For example, my name is. And on the other hand, on the other side, we have cognitive academic language proficiency, or CALP. This is the language that we need for academic study. For example, if you're making a point or you're helping your students make a point, asking your students to make a point, maybe you would be looking at structures like this one, from my point of view. Okay, so another way we can help learners develop language when looking at content would be to help them distinguish different structures, different ways of expressing ideas according to their context, if it's a social context or an academic context. Okay, let's move on. Okay, Very connected to these two terms, BICS and CALP. Don't worry, they are not very common, but you might find them in a couple of books. Very connected to that, you have, or we have this other idea, this other way of supporting language learning, which is finding a purpose for the language. This is what we also know as functional language. This is teaching language, teaching grammar and vocabulary, but not looking at grammar items, but looking at their function. For example, giving opinions. Let's see if you can share in the chat how to give opinions in English. Can you think of a way in which you could phrase an opinion? According to me, yes, very good. It is said, excellent, I think, perfect. So same thing with agreeing or disagreeing, describing a process, right? This would be functions, language functions. And if you look at the ideas that you posted on the chat, you will see that they are made of different words. So we wouldn't be teaching in isolation according the ing to the preposition, me, the pronoun, right? We're going to teach this as a fixed phrase, for example, as a set of words within a specific function. So it makes more sense when we're teaching with CLIL to look at grammar and vocabulary from the functional perspective. So this would also mean that it would make a lot of sense to have a functional syllabus instead of a grammar-based syllabus. Instead of teaching the simple present, we're going to teach how to describe, how to talk about past events. So I have here, believe it or not, it's very difficult to find truly absolutely functional syllabus in books. They are not very common. Very, very often they have the function, but they also include the specific grammar points. So here's an example of what a functional syllabus might look like. So you have there some of these language functions like understanding and asking for information. Then what's the language that you would be using or that you would use for that function? And after that, some language patterns that are used for these functions, for expressing these functions, okay? So this means that probably you're not going to teach the simple present before the simple past, because if you're teaching history, well, you might just want to focus your entire semester in events in past. Okay, then moving on, talking about this grammar and vocabulary integration, it is also very good practice. Actually, this comes from research. People who write papers and essays and books and articles, for example, have been doing some research on how teachers work with CLIL in the classroom. So it seems that most of them agree that it makes a lot more sense to integrate grammar and vocabulary into what is called chunks, language chunks. Just as the examples that you posted in the chat. For example, we have, well, you've got a point, but, or yes, but on the other hand, personally, I think, as I see it, these are all phrases, a combination of grammar and vocabulary. They are chunks that we can use to give an opinion or change someone else's opinion. So maybe if you are teaching, what, economics or maybe some science, why not? You want to teach your students how to share their opinions and how to try to change someone else's opinions. So it would be very useful to provide, to study, to look at these chunks, to teach them so that they can use them and they can actually engage in a discussion. Okay, good. So we explored some ideas on how to support language. Now we're going to move on to explore some ideas on how to support content, right? And remember, when we talk about content, what we mean is curricular subjects. It might be marketing if you're teaching at college or university level, or it might be science, very typically in the primary or elementary grades, or even kindergarten, right? So whatever the content you're teaching, it might be too much for your students. It might be too challenging, too demanding, right? So what we want are some ways, some strategies in which we can provide some help, some support. So a very common way of providing the support for access, for granting access to content is the use of visual organizers, such as this one. So can you use the chat and post here, what's the name of this graphic organizer? Can you recognize this? How is it called? How do we call this? The Venn diagram, of course. And it helps you what? Venn diagram, we use it to focus on what? To identify what? Okay. So we use this things in common between two topics. Yes, okay, so similarities and differences, right? So if you look at the sections when the circles do not intersect, that would be their differences. Plants need carbon dioxide, sun, nutrients, animals need oxygen and food, but their similarities, what they have in common is air, water, and energy, right? So imagine that you just showed your students a video, but of course you cannot be sure that they understood each and every word, and this is actually what you're trying to teach, similarities and differences, so it makes a lot of sense to use a Venn diagram. Here's another organizer, another graphic organizer or visual organizer. This describes what? What do you think? Can you use a chat? A cycle, very good, or a process. What happens with a butterfly? How from the eggs it becomes a butterfly. Very good. And also a very good, very important point of graphic organizers is that then you could use this very same graphic organizer. For example, probably they complete with the names, and after that, they can use the graphic organizer to produce language, to start speaking. A sequence, very good, very good. That's a good idea as well. It explains the sequence of these events, right? And finally, here's a pie chart. And this refers to here, countries by proportion of world population. So maybe you just gave them a very difficult, a very challenging, or a very long paragraph on this, on world population, but you want them to get the main idea. For me, the main idea here would be that these countries that are not very highly populated represent a very, very, very large chunk compared to these other large countries, for example. Okay, so this helps you summarize, this helps you confirm whatever your input was during a content lesson. Okay, good. Then let's see. This is better. Okay, another way to support content learning is to help students identify or distinguish between low order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills. When we talk about thinking skills, we refer to these mental processes such as remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. So low order thinking skills are less complex processes and higher order thinking skills are higher processes. Now, look at this and use the chat to tell me, what do you think? Which processes would require more language? Or more challenging use of language, more extensive use of language? Lower order or higher order thinking skills? Exactly, higher order, because lower order, you're doing things such as remembering. So probably you're going to answer with one word. Very good, thank you. I can see your answers. But then higher order thinking skills would require more complex structures and words, evaluating. Well, on the one hand, I think China is a very big country, but on the other hand, see, this is a more complex structure. Okay, moving on. Another way to develop or to build upon these cognitive skills is to work with questions in the classroom or whenever you're teaching a curriculum subject. For example, is this a primary color? You're going to answer yes or no. Do primary colors come from other colors? Again, yes or no. So you can use these yes, no questions or questions that require only one word for lower order thinking skills. And questions such as, how do you produce color orange? Or why are they called secondary colors? Questions with why and how they address higher order thinking skills. Okay, moving on. Good. Let's see. There. So, we already looked at some ways to support language. We already looked at some ways to support content, but another very important aspect here would be to organize this. We know that when teaching under a CLIL approach, we need to integrate language and content, but how do we do that? So one idea here, or probably the most common idea, would be to use tasks and projects, and especially if they can be cross-curricular, well, that would be way better. So let's look at one example of a task here. Our task is creating a timeline. Let's say that you're working with, or you're trying to help your students write a biography, so they need a timeline of what happened in someone's life. So what you need to do is identify or help your students identify the language that they need. For example, describing past events, all of our past tenses. how to express events in a chronological order. Remembering, being able to express dates. Probably the prepositions there would be very important. And identifying important events. You might want to use a graphic organizer to do this. What's important and what's not. So you identify the language, you identify the ingredients that you need, and then they are ready to work on their task. Okay, so what this gives you is a variety of language. You're not just teaching the past tense, you're teaching many other things along with the past tense. And then we have here scaffolding. This is another way to integrate language and content. For example, you have a task, a more complex task. Write a paragraph about the process to produce coffee. So very likely your students are not going to come up with all of these ideas. Probably they have no idea on how coffee is produced. So for example, scaffolding means that you're going to break a task, a complex task, into smaller and achievable steps. So this would be the steps towards writing a paragraph about the process. For example, first they can name some pictures. So you brainstorm some vocabulary. Then you can use web chart to brainstorm some verbs to describe pictures. They already have some pictures, some ideas, then they have the verbs. Then you could have an activity in which they order the pictures, right? So they have some idea now of the process. Then you might want to teach, to show them, to have a word bank with connecting words, how they are used, their meanings, so they can use them. And finally, they are ready to write their paragraphs to describe a process of how coffee is grown. See? So again, we have many different language items in one task. This task is divided in mini tasks, which creates scaffolding towards a more complex task. Okay. And we are almost at the end of this. So here's some kind of summary of how these ideas can work together. So what we want is to create a safe and enriching environment in which we build students' confidence to experiment with language and content. So as you can imagine, there will be a lot of language production. It doesn't mean, of course, that language is going to be perfect. We need practice, as always, and we need to build towards accuracy. But it's very, very, very important at this point to help learners express their ideas. We want to build their confidence so they can do this. Experiment with language, that's the only way they are going to learn. Then guiding access to authentic learning materials and environments. So what we mean here is, for example, when you create a task or when you work with a task, it is a lot more meaningful, it is a lot more authentic than giving them some random exercise for them to complete, or just a reading and then do nothing with the reading, right? We create an authentic learning environment, and we use authentic learning materials when we have a purpose, when we want to achieve something. Then increasing student language awareness. This is just what we discussed earlier in the language section of this presentation. Remember that we want to help them look at the words, what kind of words they are, and we want them to look at the structures, what structures would they need to talk about history, to talk about civics, to talk about economics, right? That is creating language awareness. Then we also want to foster active learning. And the main idea, the most important idea here would be students communicating more than the teacher, right? When we're working with content, with curriculum subjects, we usually have very extensive readings and videos or lectures. So we want that, or we need that, of course, because that would be the input. But what we want in the classroom is for students to be working and talking to each other, interacting with each other, right? So whenever you plan your tasks, bear in mind that they are created for the purpose of interaction. Then favoring peer cooperative work. Well, this is just similar to the previous idea. We want students to interact with each other, and then also to promote active learning, we want to help students evaluate their own progress, because this is going to help them be more aware of their needs, on whatever they need to improve. Okay. What are some advantages of working with CLIL? Well, in a nutshell, we could say that it helps develop confident learners, because they can talk about any topic. They can use language like a truly bilingual person. This means they could do something very similar to what they can do in their own language in a different language. Then it enhances academic cognitive processes and communication skills. So remember, CLIL includes not only our typical grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, also it includes cognitive processes, remember, like analyzing and evaluating. So this helps in a way with what they very often say, which is thinking in English. We help students think in English. Then learners become more responsive to ideas presented in the target language. This is sometimes we can give our students a reading text, but there's no way they are going to respond to the text if they don't have these strategies and this targeted language to be able to respond to the text. And finally, learners gain more extensive and varied vocabulary in the target language. So this means that compared to general English, this would be a richer English lesson, a much richer English lesson. Okay, so, well, we are very close to the end, actually. At least the time I think we're supposed to finish. Okay, so this is it. This is the end of the presentation. I hope you liked the ideas that I just put forward. And thank you. This is my email address in case you want to ask any further questions. Well, anyway, I think we will have some time for that, for questions, right? Let's see if Orlando is around. Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry, the camera just fell off. So I was like, yeah, what's happening to my camera? Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Veronica. I'm pretty sure that people found helpful. So now, because we still have some time, guys. So if anybody would like to go to the Q&As, I didn't really see any Q's and A's in the Q's and A section, well, not A's, but any questions in the Q's and A section. But if anybody would like to, ask any questions, maybe that Veronica hasn't fully answered already in the webinar, you could just go ahead and go to the Q's and A section. In the meantime, I'm going to share, now that we're talking about CLIL, I think it's very useful to refer to, a very interesting new thing that we are launching. And this is because, again, people have been talking about this, people have been asking about this, but as of this summer, so this is brand new, right from the oven. As of summer this year, we're going to be offering this new certificate, this new course, this new program that we've developed as part of the new pipeline of innovation, of course. And this is the CLIL course. So precisely, a couple of things that Veronica was talking about just right now. We have developed a course precisely that, focuses on that. We're going to be talking about precisely the CLIL experience, where, what makes CLIL different from other areas are going to be, this is going to be analyzed, right? Like precisely the focus on CLIL methodology, planning for CLIL, thinking skills in CLIL, differentiating, consolidation, planning, etc. And it's quite a nice course, I think, also because it's not just like only theoretical. One of the key differences between this CLIL course and maybe other options out there is that we are actually going to be observing you teach a CLIL class. So we're going to be doing lesson planning. We're going to be doing lesson planning with you. If anybody here is new to to this field and would like to give CLIL a try, this is also something interesting that you could try. There is like proper observations, feedback, observations of people doing CLIL classes, and along the way you're also going to be getting preparation for the TKT exam. So we're going to be looking into CLIL methodology with a view to also preparing you for the CLIL TKT examination, because if maybe you didn't know, there is a TKT module that focuses on CLIL. So this is also something that we're going to be exploring on that course, right? Anyway, if anybody's interested in this, you could just email me. I'm going to give you my email address. It's right here. So it's ttmx@ihmexico.com. Or you could email Veronica as well. She's been kind enough to provide her email address. Thank you for that, Vero. Thank you.
My pleasure, sure.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. So anyway, so that's a course, but because we also really do care about your feedback, and also Veronica would like to hear your feedback.
Sure.
Thank you. So here is a form. This is a Google form that, again, we would love if you could complete. This literally just takes 5 minutes. So if you could just go ahead and give us your feedback, we will highly appreciate it, because this is the penultimate, like I said at the start of the webinar, this is the penultimate webinar. We do have one more webinar coming next week. Sorry, in 2 weeks from now, sorry, in July. It's right here. We're going to be in July. It's going to be our final webinar of this webinar series. And today, Veronica, was talking about high order, lower order tasks. So this is another topic that we're going to be following up on in around 2 weeks from now. This is going to be July the 8th. So if anybody would like to, again, sign up for that one, this is something that you could just do directly. I'm also going to give you the direct link to that so that you can then sign up. But it's there right there in the chat box, but it's something that you could very easily find in our IH Media Room. Remember that in our IH Media Room, you can find our webinars and our programs, everything. And you can also, right to the bottom, you could also find our YouTube channel right here, right? So remember, if you subscribe to that channel, then you'll be receiving, automatic notifications of all of the, there we go. We are broadcasting live in directo, right? So it's something that you could just subscribe to, and you'll be able to find previous recordings of sessions, and also more importantly, you'll be updated with pretty much everything that we've been running for the last year for you guys, right? So again, give us 5 minutes of your time. People are already giving us answers. You could also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you can find us here on our International House University Programs Media Room address, right? So that's all I wanted to say. I don't know if there's been any other Q's and A's. Any final questions from the floor? Anyone? Veronica, anything that maybe, any final thoughts from your end?
Well, I guess my final thought would be, do explore CLIL, because it really, really enhances your teaching, but it really helps learners. Whatever they are planning to do, work abroad, study abroad, or here, it will be very, very, very important to be able to communicate on complex and varied topics. So do go into CLIL. That would be my final thought.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much, Veronica. And like you said, it's one of the things that like learners will really appreciate and benefit from, moving forward, right? And bilingual schools now are really looking into this, as something they need to integrate into the teaching. So, and the repertoire of things that the teachers do. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time, Veronica. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Orlando. It was really nice. I enjoyed it a lot. This is my first webinar, but it was enjoyable.
More to come, right? More to come, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Good. Hopefully next time it will be face-to-face. We're missing that.
Yeah, I really hope so. Like people now are really, we really do want to come back. So
yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely, provided that the COVID traffic light, green, yellow, orange, red,
Yeah. Well, we'll just have to learn to live with it and
yeah, absolutely.
Start doing whatever we like.
Absolutely, taking the right precautions. Absolutely. So thank you for your time, Veronica. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for staying tuned. Have a lovely Thursday, lovely end of the month. And remember, the summer is just around the corner, right? So enjoy your summer, plan for and be productive, all right? So stay tuned and goodbye. Bye-bye. Thank you, Veronica. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you.